All right, all right. Let's continue with the book of Genesis. And in the same verse 1, Genesis 1:1, we see that the earth was without void and empty. It was without form. It was formless, in other words, and it was empty. It was lifeless. But we know from science that there were billions of years prior to mankind in which dinosaurs and the age of dinosaurs existed. So what we can interpolate in the very first verse of Genesis is that there's a gap in time, an unspecified time between in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was without form and void. It was formless and empty. So the logical conclusion is that it was not created formless and empty, but it was created with in an age of the dinosaurs. It was created with life which we are not familiar with today. And science backs this up because, the fossil record indicates that there were life forms that are not in existence today, and even to the point of plant life. Not only dinosaurs, but plant life was completely different from what we have today. So, how did the earth become void and without form? How did it become empty and formless? It was just a conglomerate of matter. It wasn't even a circular form. It was just, like the asteroids. It was just a clump of matter that had no form. And, of course, there was no life there. Well, billions of years prior to that, part of verse 1, we see that God created the heaven and the earth. And, a creation is a work of art. And there's a purpose behind it. And the little known purpose for the creation of the heaven and the earth, meaning the universe, is that it was a test. It was intended as nothing more than a test of beings which had existed from infinity with the God of gods. And you'll have to refer back to my first two presentations to understand what I'm talking about in this case. It was a test of the host in which exists, the test of the host who existed with the God of gods. Elohim means God of gods, not necessarily gods or God. It means God of gods. And it was a test to determine who would obey the God of gods and who would not. So God created the heaven and the earth and appointed certain individuals to be caretakers of this. As it turned out, these were the angels, these were the devil, and these were his angels. And as predicted or as anticipated by the God of gods, the King of a greater, far greater reality than anything we can perceive as the creation, these beings were appointed as caretakers to the creation. In other words, devil and his angels and other angels who were ultimately obedient to the God of gods were appointed as dinosaur herders. Essentially, they were appointed to take care of the creation that was begun when God created heaven and the earth. And the devil and his angels, or those that he convinced, were not satisfied with the task that they had been given. So they thought it was beneath them. So they rebelled against the God of gods, or God, and they attempted to take over heaven. They attempted to take over the kingdom which has ever existed, far greater reality than the creation, and they were summarily thrown back into this reality, this creation, and they became Satan and his minions, or his devils. Thus begins the story of creation, and the devil and the serpent are summarily the same, and they attempt to sabotage everything that God has done, including the creation of humanity. So what we see and realize at this point is that the creation event described in Genesis is not the original creation, but is the creation relating to mankind and to mankind's reign upon the earth. Now, it's not necessarily 6,000 years ago. It's probably longer than that. But at some point, God created mankind through Adam and Eve and others that he probably created at the same time or shortly thereafter, and mankind began to reign upon the earth. God also created the ecosystem that we now see surrounding us, which is a completely different ecosystem than the ages of the dinosaurs. Plant life is different, animals are different, everything's different. And humanity was given reign over this, and quite differently than the reign given to the devil and his angels. Mankind is mortal and is an integral part of the creation itself, whereas the devil and his angels were not. Even so, the Genesis creation And Genesis itself says to mankind, replenish the earth. In the same way that Noah, after the flood, which that's an entirely different story or another story for later, in the same way that Noah was told to replenish the earth after most of humanity was drowned. So Adam and Eve were told to replenish the earth, and from there they existed as individuals who lived for thousands of years in some cases, and there were probably individuals who were born or created at the same time as Adam, or near the same time as Adam, and who lived for thousands of years after that, all the way up until the flood. And but they died, just as God predicted, or cursed Adam, the consequences of Adam's sin. So there are things in the scriptures that most people don't even acknowledge. But they are there. They are there to interpolate, they are there to examine, and they tell the story of not only how mankind came into existence, but how and why God created the heaven and the earth. So at this point, I've done 3 presentations on Genesis, and primarily upon Genesis 1:1. I think at this point, if you're listening to this, you can gain a very clear understanding of how the Bible begins and how it describes the beginning of the creation. So, next time, I will talk about Noah and the flood. So, until then, goodbye.